Let's get started, everybody. Mark, John, everybody ready? Go right ahead.
Morning, Commissioners. Today's work session is over the updated building codes. As some of you know, in 2020, the county, for the first time in its history, adopted building codes. That was the 06 International Residential Code.
Could you speak up just a little bit? I got railroad ears.
It was the 06 International Residential Code and the 06 International Building Code. These are adopted again in 2020. At the direction of the BOCC in early 2024, staff and the Board of Appeals went through the process of identifying a code that would serve moving into the future. And what we looked for was a stable code. That code ended up being the 2012 IRC and IBC. As part of code adoption, you typically go through local amendments to accommodate that code to your local condition. I'm going to let Kyle talk about all of those. We went through about 8 months to 10 months of review through that committee and came up with a series of recommended local amendments that we're going to present to you here today. But our recommendation at the end of the day is to adopt the 2012 IRC and IBC. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kyle and let him go through the process.
Welcome, Kyle. All yours.
Just to be clear, we're not adopting anything today. This is just a work session.
This is just a work session to show you those local amendments, but our next steps forward after the work session, should you not make any changes, are moving towards adoption.
Yeah.
But to be clear, we're not adopting anything today.
Okay.
So as John said, we met multiple times with the Building Codes Appeals Committee over 2012, went through both codes chapter by chapter to ensure that we were adopting something that worked, that did not have areas that there were discrepancies between two areas, so we went chapter by chapter. I've brought up the changes that will be made by adopting the 2012 code and not give you the whole code of hundreds, if not 1,000 pages. So from what we had in our currently adopted 2006 IRC, right now those only apply to new single-family residences. The Appeals Board recommended adding accessory buildings and decks to those structures that are required to meet the code. Agricultural buildings would still be exempt, but only if it was on a property that was 10 acres or larger. So if you had what you called an ag building on a 5-acre property, it would be subject to the code. Permits required on all buildings and decks 200 square feet and larger. That's what the building code states. Our zoning subdivision regulations call for permits on everything 100 square foot or larger. So we were going to look into changing it to the 200 to match the building code, and a text amendment would come later to change the zoning and subdivision regulations if that's what you chose to do. We would require a full set of building plans for single-family homes and accessory dwelling units. They would not have to be stamped by an engineer or design professional, so as long as it was a legitimate, real set of plans, something the building official could accept and wasn't drawn out on a napkin, we need some real plans for these.
Yeah. What's our current practice?
Current practice is hand-drawn is allowed as long as it shows all the information we're looking for. Yeah. Dimensions of rooms, all the rooms labeled, neatly drawn with a ruler and not just sketched out. So they are very less, we require a lot less than some other jurisdictions around currently.
So any future plan would be required to be to scale and show the elements of the room. So you can identify.
I assume other jurisdictions require engineer.
It depends on where you're at, but yeah, that's very typical. Let's, for instance, say Johnson County. Yes, all of Johnson County requires a design professional. That's what the code states. They don't typically pull that from the code, but they're not in a rule setting.
What's Jefferson County require?
Jefferson County, I don't believe requires.
What's Atchison require?
Atchison's very, very simple. And then Jefferson County, I don't believe they require an engineered stamp. With this, like I said, ours would not require an engineered stamp. If they did something, alternative methods of construction or something abnormal, we can always, the building official has the right to require engineered plans for certain structures if it is deemed necessary.
So again, the intent here behind this particular amendment is to accommodate a rule setting where you're not going to have those design elements in everything that you get through the door. We still reserve the right if the system is proprietary or it's to a point where it really requires an engineer stamp, you have the ability to do that. But standard homes, yeah, there's not going to be an issue there from a design standpoint.
So if it's residential, just like one house, this is an application. If you were going to have a platted subdivision, you'd have to.
Well, typically in a platted subdivision, what you'll have is the same 3 or 4 floor plans that are flipped. So traditionally what happens with developers that build that amount of houses is they'll get all 3 of those plans approved and then reference the plan in the building permit. It's plan number 16, which you already have on file. Wouldn't require a resubmittal of that plan over and over and over again.
Very good.
Truss design drawings or the shop drawings will be required to be submitted to our office upon delivery of those trusses. Right now, we do not require that. Ice barrier and underlayment would be required. That's your ice and water shield.
Roofing.
The biggest thing on that is if someone has it before on the house and storm comes in, they need a new roof. If we don't require it, insurance companies do not have to pay for it. So if you have it before, they say, no, it's not required, and then the homeowner has to pay for that. We have removed Chapter 13 entirely. That is the energy efficiency chapter. A lot of the green building is located in that chapter, so we have fully eliminated that chapter.
And that would be higher, like more insulation required,
Insulation.
thicker windows.
Right, thermal envelopes, yeah, all of those relative requirements are part and parcel to pretty much any of the international codes. So most of that is contained in chapter 13.
So typically the builders in the community that are building newer homes, are they complying with one of these code years? What code year were they?
Typically, what you're going to see is the 2018, but they're building in many jurisdictions. And in those jurisdictions, you're going to have components that have energy elements to their code. So they're going to build with the same materials over and over again. Again, we're setting the minimum criteria, not the maximum criteria. So none of that precludes the builder from using energy efficient windows or additional insulation or any of the components that make up that Chapter 13. We're just saying it's not mandatory in Leavenworth County at this time.
That's the majority of the changes for the residential side. Any additional question on residential before we switch over to the IBC, which is commercial?
I did have a couple questions. I talked to one of your codes board members, and we were chatting about the proliferation of homes in Leavenworth County that are on slabs. That even the consideration of RHID tax abatements to build up to hundreds of homes on slabs. And the fact is that those homes are not going to have access by the plans to any kind of a tornado shelter. So you're going to have hundreds of people potentially from year to year, going from 2024 to 2025, we could be going to the point where we're putting maybe up to 1,000 families in structures that don't have tornado shelters or any access to tornado shelters. So that was a conversation, was his thought process was that should not be in codes. That should be in the platting process, to where if you had more than X number of houses built, then you put in a requirement for A, B, or C, either a storm shelter at a playhouse or a central point, or you build a safe room, or you have a basement. Give options in a plat where you have a larger number of houses being built. So that was his comment. He didn't think it should be in codes. How do you think we should address this increasing danger to have these folks being placed on slab homes without storm shelters.
We have a slide on that.
Okay.
In a couple, we can.
But to briefly answer your question, ICC 500 is actually a code requirement and specifies the type of shelter that you have to have with an occupant load as base code criteria. I disagree that it should be a land use element. If you're going to adopt something like that, logically it should be in the building code, in my opinion. Building codes, residential codes don't typically require residential storm shelters on single-family homes. A number of jurisdictions do make that a requirement throughout the county or throughout the country, but currently that hasn't been proposed. Again, I think that becomes a policy issue.
Or where you have these housing developers like Roush Coleman there in Tonganoxie,
Sure.
or a proposal that I've seen down in the south part of the county that involves, I can't remember, 450 housing units that are all on slabs, where an issue hadn't been an issue before. Now it's an issue because we're putting a lot of people on slab houses, and you're actually allowing a danger to be created.
Well, there are a number of options open to residential property owners. There are a lot of prefab storm shelters that are out there right now that run between $4,000 and $5,000 per pod. You also have FEMA 320, which is a standard that FEMA put out a number of years ago that will meet the wind loads, the 250-mile-an-hour wind loads for a tornado shelter with passive and active ventilation systems in it. So there are a number of resources that are out there available to people right now, should they choose to use them. We did bring this particular question to the committee. And I think the committee's major concern was that the additional cost over, the project would add $4,000 to $5,000, and that was concerning to them. But we did ask that question, and it hasn't been submitted as a local amendment as of yet. But this board can certainly make that happen, and we can include that in our amendments.
Is it always 4,000 or 5,000? I mean, have we researched into that? If there's more economical ways to?
We have researched into that, and $3,800 seems to be the low water point for a 4x4 shelter. Typically, the occupant load of a storm shelter is 2 square feet per occupant.
So, let's just take a slab home. Estimate around 300,000 is what these slab homes are being marketed for. That's about 10%. To add a storm shelter, you're talking about 10%.
I agree. Yeah,
And
that's the number.
so 10%. I mean, it never comes into play, but when an F5 tornado comes,
I don't like correcting, but
Yeah.
10% of 300,000 is 30,000. You're talking about.
Oh, yeah, well, I was-
You're talking about
1%.
1 to 2%.
yeah. Sorry,
Negligible cost.
I
knew what you
You know why I'm not a math major, but
Knew what you meant.
1%. So that makes my argument even better. 1% cost on a $300,000 house.
Almost. And we did bring this up to them because it was asked. We had been told, hey, instructed to bring this to them and say, see what they thought about it. Their biggest concerns was additional mandatory requirements for the builders and property owners. Significant cost increase to homeowners, which I think we've just talked about, and then no cities in Leavenworth County currently require this. They were all pro storm shelter. They thought they were a great idea. I don't think any of them would ever live in a house that didn't have a basement or storm shelter. However, they did not think it was right at this time to force others into putting that into their home. They did say our best bet, what they would recommend is offering an avenue to be safe without a mandate. So during plan review, determine if the home has a basement or storm shelter. If not, note on the permit, no storm shelter. Storm shelters are recommended but not required in Leavenworth County.
So if this adds 1% to the cost and we have one F5 tornado, you're basically creating thousands. It's like creating mobile homes is what you're doing. We don't have it right now, but if we allow all these developments to come into Leavenworth County, we're going to have thousands of people without storm shelters, and I think we need to consider that, because if it adds 1% to your cost to require either And in my thought process is if you build more than X number of houses, then the requirement comes into play. Maybe not if you're building one single residential house, but if we're going to allow, I think we really have to consider this.
I don't have a problem with them. Each homeowner should be responsible for it and knowing what's on. I like the idea of putting it on there, saying there's no basement. There's other options too. You know, cities do community centers and basements and stuff like that. I don't know if I want to force my opinion on them, even though it'd be in their best interest if they'd done that. Now, after saying that, if somebody's building a lot of them, I mean, we're talking a couple hundred homes, well, then maybe that's something we should think about.
Could we put it in the planning process if you could build more than X number of homes that this requirement comes into play?
Mark, you got something?
Commissioners, I see a challenge with that. Two challenges, really. One, so the first 50 homes they build, they don't have to put the storm shelter in because we don't know what, they're not telling us necessarily, I'm going to build 100 homes this year. So, and is it per year, or is it per builder, or is it per location? And then if the point is that we want to make these houses safer, what's the difference whether you're building one or 100?
Yeah, I would think it would have to be across the board.
If it's a safety issue, so if I just go build my own home, I don't have to do it. But if Kyle is going to go out and build 25 homes, he has to.
Well, the obvious answer to that is you're involving hundreds
More
of people. And if you have if you're making your own decision to build your own private residence, you're making your own decision because maybe you have mom and dad live across the road. That's where I can go for my storm shelter. But if we're building hundreds of slab homes, we're putting people at risk. We're actually, as a government, allowing people to be put at risk.
Did you have an example of, you stated earlier, if the house was in such and such condition and wasn't in code, then the insurance wouldn't replace it. That sounds interesting.
That was relative to the ice and water shield
Yeah.
on a roof. So typically, the ice and water shield is a local amendment, and if it's not included as a local amendment to the code, insurance companies typically don't pay for it. They pay for the minimum code required improvements. So ice and water shield is very common in this exposure level in northeast Kansas, and it's just appropriate to stick it in there. Most jurisdictions have this currently.
One reason we did codes in the beginning was because we had a church down in southern Leavenworth County that was damaged by the Glenwood tornado. Yeah. And when they were required to rebuild, the state fire marshal had adopted a code level that required them to put sprinklers in. And when the insurance company did not want to pay because Leavenworth County did not have codes. And then so that was becoming an issue. So that's one reason why we implement basic codes.
Okay.
So to get to your question, Commissioner, I think what the administrator was saying is correct. If you put a number on that, let's say it's 25 homes, developer comes in, he knows he's going to build 500. I promise you, he's never going to build more than 24 at a time. Each time, that cycle is going to be such that he's not going to put those storm shelters in. So if you're going to do it, I agree with Mark that if it's good for one, it's good for all. I would be very leery about putting a number on that. If you do, community shelters are probably the answer. The problem with community shelters is typically they lack maintenance. You put them together, and 25 years later, nobody has maintained the shelter. Doors are rotting out, can't close, can't open. All the components of ICC 500, it doesn't comply with them anymore because nobody's performed the maintenance.
But wouldn't it be easier to do with churches that have basements and other facilities and work with them to have them as a shelter instead of putting it on a developer to have to make these available? I got a basement. I wouldn't live without a basement in Kansas, to be honest with you. But at the same time, I just want to see there's another new alternative. We're trying to get them to build in Leavenworth County, and we keep throwing additional requirements on them, and I just don't know it's the best way to go.
Well, from a staff standpoint, I think traditionally people don't understand that storm shelters are not required in single family. I think everybody assumes that they are. I think providing the general public with the resources to accommodate a reasonable cost to a storm shelter is prudent. You're not putting that on the back of developers. You're not putting that on the back of anybody other than the end user,
their
which
option.
is, it's their option.
Okay.
We could certainly provide that option to anyone that applied for that building permit. We could certainly put it out on the website, what resources are available to accommodate your storm shelter. How can you accomplish that? Either FEMA 320 or a prefab shelter. There are a number of elements there that people could utilize to protect themselves. I don't know that we can physically, we could mandate it. I don't know how that reception would be. Again, at the end of the day, every dollar counts when you're developing. $4,000 or $5,000, yeah, it's a negligible cost if you're talking about a $400,000 or $500,000 home.
Was it you and I that spoke previously about how we can't legally go through and say these churches are open because they have to meet certain specs in order for the county to advertise it as a storm shelter?
It would have to meet ICC 500, and I don't know that you and I had that particular conversation. I don't recall it if
Okay.
we do. And those types of community shelters are really, they're intended to serve an existing need, not really designed for that particular use.
Right.
But they're there and available to things like trailer houses, trailer parks, where you obviously have no community shelter and you don't have any other form of shelter. It makes sense if it's in proximity. But if you're building it, if your occupant load is over 50, you must have an ICC 500 compliant shelter.
So in Tonganoxie, and I can only speak for Tonganoxie, one of the issues with having shelters in churches and even at the school is the liability. And the local governments are very concerned about the liability. So they're concerned, maybe, for instance, their basement of their church doesn't stand up to X qualifications.
Right.
And so this is a very big problem when you're building hundreds of slab homes. So if we don't put a requirement, there will literally be no shelter for those folks. And we will have created the situation for that to occur because we're going from a point where we had very few slab homes to, in a very quick time frame, we're going to have hundreds of them. So I think we really need to consider, like my thought process is if you build a subdivision that's planned, then you have to either have a community storm shelter, a safe room, or a basement. And of course, the easiest for a developer would be to have a lot of these developments and have playhouses where they have a basement, someplace you could go. So but I don't think it's responsible to have hundreds of slab homes being built and us just say, oh, it's your choice. Well, it is your choice. That's true, but we're putting hundreds of them where we didn't have the same kind of we're creating an exponential risk.
If I could just hop in here, Commissioner. Again, we're not exempting a code requirement that would allow them not to build a storm shelter. This requirement does not exist in the residential code as it stands today. Slab-on-grade homes have been around for 50 years, and they exist in many, many communities. So I don't know that we're creating a danger, maybe not accommodating this area of the country's apparent danger might be an appropriate assessment of that.
Depends how you word it. It's all in the semantics.
That's not wrong. But at the end of the day, we've asked the question, and whatever the commission wants to do, we'll certainly move forward.
Well, we think this is dead. What commission do you want it in or out? I mean, unless you got some more questions on this.
I'm going to offer a motion when this comes to a resolution stage to add either you have at a certain number of housing that you add either a basement storm shelter playhouse, a safe room, or have a basement, or have a plan in the community.
So, Commissioners, part of this process, we have to publish the proposed amendments. So, from a staff level, we need to know what direction you want us to take.
Jeff, what do you want? Let's just get down to it. We can talk this thing to death. Yay or nay?
I don't understand where our priorities are. So that's part of it, adding this little part of it. But we don't have any money. So I suggest we wait to even talk about building coastal after the budget cycle because we need bridges. The roof is falling in on the courthouse first. You know how this started? This whole building code thing started? It wasn't even from anybody local in Leavenworth County. It was an outside contractor that came in from the tornado that hit and said, hey, we're mad because we can't charge this person more money to fix their house because you guys don't have building codes. That's how this started. An outside person, an outside contractor. Nobody in Leavenworth County started this. You can leave my townships out of it, and then you can do whatever you want. But my township is not like the rest of the county. You spend, here's our new CIP. We spent $6 million in my district on roads and bridges. We spent $30 million on everybody else's district. My district is not like the rest of the county. So if you guys want to do this, maybe the southeast part of the county where there's a lot more people, that's fine. But people in the north are more like Jefferson County and Atchison County, which is why I asked that. They don't have building codes. Why? People move out in the county for a reason, and that's a big one. This is Big Brother forcing more regulation on the little guy. More regulation on the little guy. Biggest problem, though, is we don't have any money to do this. We can't afford inspectors. If you don't have inspectors, what is the point of even having building codes? It's silly. We're going to spend more time and money on building codes instead of replacing bridges? I don't understand.
Well, as far as building codes go, I understand what you're saying up there, but I think building codes have a place as far as making sure we're helping people protect themselves from themselves on some things. Now, how far we take those building codes and how far we put the handle down on it is something that we need to talk about. Right now, we're talking about this particular one, and you may.
I get it, but has our building codes fixed anything and helped anything so far? It's got us sued a couple times.
Yeah, I'm not just.
So I'm just
trying to
saying.
get a feel
Yeah,
for
I'm
where
just
we're
saying
going.
no. I'm not for any of this.
Mike?
Well, first of all, I've met with several developers. I sat down with one of the biggest developers that builds large houses in the county, and he said that he's very, very happy with the fact that we have building codes in the county so that fly-by-night operations cannot come in, don't have requirements for trusses, don't have requirements for the roofs. He said he's glad, and in fact, he thought that there should be a more stringent requirements. We've made the requirements very loose in Leavenworth County to the fact that your liability is the fact that you didn't do it, and you can be held liable later by the next owner of the home by him bringing a suit in district court. We don't have inspectors. So that being said, having a code, like if we require either a safe room, a playhouse with a basement, or a basement, if we put that requirement on, and out in the county, Roush Coleman comes and builds a subdivision, he's going to build to that standard. That's why you have codes. That's what he's going to follow. And by that factor alone is a good reason to have some basic codes. These are very minimal codes. Compared to Johnson County, our codes are very minimal, but we have a certain layer, and we discovered after the tornado that not having any codes was a problem. So I would like to see us at least have some kind of, if you're building X number of houses in a large subdivision, then you have to have some provision or at least a plan for those folks to evacuate during a tornado.
Mr. Chair, can I answer that?
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
So I still have the paperwork where I pulled 8 contractors in Leavenworth County. Not one of them was for building codes. They all said they do not want building codes. And they also said, we already build building codes. This is not about we don't want to have to build a building codes. We already do. They all already build the building codes. It wasn't about that.
Okay, I think we got two issues.
We're talking
And the
building
other-
codes.
And the other thing was our fire chiefs did not ask for building codes.
Yeah, we got-
My 2 fire chiefs do not ask for
We got
building
two
codes.
things. We got to switch from answering the question about staying in the basement for tornadoes to come over and play Wizard of Oz to not having codes at all. I'd ask that right now you decide and let me know. Jeff, you made it very clear. Mike, you made it very clear about the basement. As far as I'm concerned, it's up to the individual. I don't think it's me forcing them on that. So sticking with just that on the basements, Mr. Dove, how do you feel about this?
I don't think we should be forcing our wishes on anyone. It's their personal property, and they're the ones that are really responsible for it. So I'm with Commissioner Culberson on this. You don't force this on the individual.
Okay. Vanessa?
You already have a majority.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's get back to, and let's try to stay on task. We know
You're not going to give your review?
no, we Jeff,
I would like more information, particularly on that issue, specifically on the tornado coverage. I would like to see what other counties have. I haven't researched that prior to this work session.
Typically, counties don't have requirements for storm shelters. There are towns in the MPO that have made those amendments. The one that pops in my head is Lenexa. That's the simplest amendment that offers the ability to have either a basement, some sort of subterranean alcove like your storm shelter underneath a porch kind of thing, or a prefab. Those are the three criteria that they offer. As far as tornado coverage and exposure, yeah, we're certainly in that area of the country. No one in this immediate jurisdictional area currently requires storm shelters.
I know when I go and stay in an Airbnb in Oklahoma, they have a nifty little door in the garage that you pull up and go downstairs.
Right, that's a prefab. That's a prefab unit.
So just trying to feel out what would be options. I would have more research I would want to do before voting on an issue like that.
Yeah. So one thing I would say is I agree with you, Commissioner Dove and Commissioner Culberson. On the baseline, I agree it should be people's choice. But in Leavenworth County this year, we've seen a tremendous change. And the change is we have a proliferation of housing developments that are on slabs that we didn't have before. So we've had a change in conditions.
I disagree with that completely.
We have had a change.
Eagle Valley is all slabs in Tommy
Let's
Knox.
wait a second.
But that's what I'm telling you is we've had a lot of developments coming in that are on slabs. I have a proposed development in my district that is 450 houses on slabs down by Golden Road. That's a proposal, and so I see that we're having a lot of these coming up, and the RHIDs are being all slabs. So when you're talking about a change, the change is that hundreds of people that
I'm saying I don't think there's a change. I don't think it's any different than it has been.
I would like to
Eagle
see that
Valley's
number
on slabs.
of what
So
percentage of
there's
homes
been
in
just as
Leavenworth
many
County are on
slab
slabs
houses.
versus not.
Yeah, there's
Guys,
just,
what does it matter what number's on it now? It's the future thing that they may show up or they may not show up. Bottom line is,
well, I understand what Mike's saying. I'm just saying I don't think
Oh,
there's
I
been a big
think
uptick in slabs. It's about the
but
same as
it
it's always
sounds
been.
like, Mike, hold on a second, guy. It sounds like a couple of you don't even want to have any kind of codes. I can't. You guys got me flustered.
Absolutely not.
Codes on this, and that's a totally different thing we're looking at. We'll never get through this, and don't flip past the page next time, because if Mike asks something, he can wait. We need to go through this once to shut up. We need to go through this. We need to go through this one. Mike, hold on a second, guys. I'm joking with you. We need to go through this one thing at a time so we can see where everybody's at and not keep going back and forth. Mike's very clear on how he feels about it. I think I'm open to that. But we're never going to get through this if we keep going back repeating the same thing. So please, let's get back to where we started.
Stay on task.
Exactly. And let's get this done. It's obvious, people. Let's not go back and say, I want tornado shelters. That's fine. We will get there. I don't want any kind of codes. That's fine. We understand that. But let's go through this, and then we can hopefully wrap this up. So please, start again.
Okay, so on that, that's the end of the residential side. We'll jump over to the 2006 International Building Code, which is 3-family residences or any commercial structures. All commercial structures 200 square feet and larger are required to be permitted and subject to the code. That was previously 100 foot. We're just matching what the 2012 code states. Construction documents will be prepared by a registered design professional. So no hand-drawn stuff for commercial. It's got to be legitimate stamped plans. No building or structure shall be used or occupied, and no change in the existing occupancy classification of a building or structure or portion thereof shall be made until the building official has received an affidavit of code compliance stamped and signed by the original registered design professional. So, since we do not have any kind of
There's no enforcement for this, so what we rely on is the engineer of record to come back and say the structure was built according to his design, and he submits that letter. That's the letter of code compliance. Then those people can occupy their structure.
We don't have a
Certificate of occupancy.
That's what I was looking for. So this kind of takes place to that. The engineer is saying this structure was built to the code. They're signing and stamping it, saying it's safe for the public to go into.
So let me go back here for a second. A certificate of occupancy simply is a statement from the building official of the authority having jurisdiction, in this case the county, that says this structure has been built to the minimum code, and you can now occupy the structure. It meets the design of the original permit. We don't currently have that as an option in this code. It's been struck. So that's what a certificate of occupancy is. So in the absence of having that for a commercial building permit, we will rely on this affidavit of code compliancy.
So currently, if it was a commercial structure, how are they going about it? If it was this commercial structure of 200, like we're talking about here?
We have asked, since I've been here, we have asked for an affidavit of code compliancy on a number of commercial structures. I think it's the bare minimum, and we've done that. So what we're trying to do is codify that interior policy now with this code change.
There's basically a line in the code that says a building official can ask for additional documents. We've kind of taken that and used it and said, hey, this is how we're now asking for that affidavit of code compliance. We are getting this into the code in black and white, so there's no gray area to be playing in the future.
In the absence of inspection, in the absence of a certificate of occupancy, there's nothing else to affirm that that design has been met post-construction. So that's why you ask for the affidavit.
And the change of occupancy on this is the big one, too, because we have had some structures that were once a barn, and now they want to do something else commercial with it. This gives us the coded version of give us the affidavit of code compliance stating that that structure is code compliant for the use you're looking to use it for.
And at a commercial level, the fire marshal's office has moved to reviewing even smaller projects when there's a change of occupancy. So we're reflecting that change at the state level and trying to accommodate it at the local level as well. And that's traditionally what codes do. If you change a building from its original intended use and you move it to another use, it then has to comply with that use's minimum criteria.
I know that's not our issue, but I think it's fair to say one of the reasons why we have a kind of sad downtown area is code issues that just aren't reasonable to me. If the person before you didn't need a sprinkler, you don't need one either, is what I tend to.
Which is why
fall
one
on
of the
that side of
reasons we moved to adopt the existing building section appendix of the code to accommodate previous construction. So you can make that bridge from where it was originally built to where you're trying to accommodate new requirements now.
What edition of the code does the state fire marshal use?
Currently, it's on the 06, and it's only the fire code. It's not the building code.
Just the fire code?
Yeah, what you're dealing with there is the Kansas Fire Protection Plan, which says that if your structure is built as a minimum to the 06 IRC and IBC and IFC, then it meets the intent of the Kansas Fire Protection Plan.
And that applies statewide?
Right.
Okay. So any
As it relates-
jurisdiction that does not have codes, that applies in their jurisdiction?
Well, it does from a fire suppression standpoint, yes. So
Right.
let's say that you have something that the state fire marshal, let's say you have a change of occupancy, but that remodel has complied with the 06 IBC. Then the state fire marshal says, yes, it's complied with our Kansas Fire Protection Plan because you built it to this standard. That's
And
what
they've
that
stayed
means.
with 2006, though?
Yeah, it's part of the statute, yes.
Part of the statute, okay. The requirements, just let me revisit this for a second. When we talked about the storm shelters, you said that the codes group said if we didn't make a requirement, that they would at least make information available for different options for people and have them sign that they had received that information.
We would make recommendations and
Right.
and give them resources at the time of permitting. That was their recommendation, yes.
Okay, and is that codified in this?
It's not codified. It can simply be a policy that's internal to the P&Z office.
I'd like it to be
Okay.
in writing that we
can
that's that
certainly
we are
add that.
providing information for the
Yeah, I
protection.
don't have any problem with that. Yeah.
Can you incorporate that into your?
We can.
It's like a warning. I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay.
those materials are going to change over time.
Yeah.
We'll make it pretty generic, but yes, we can certainly codify it in the
Yeah.
amendments.
I think that sounds good. Okay, anything else on this before we move on?
We're removing chapter 13 again, the energy efficiency chapter for the IBC, and then ice barrier and underlayment, ice and water shield is required.
Okay, so I have something on this.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay, so I'm confused because this all started out, from a contractor out of the county, and then it was sold to our local, or to us from our local, saying it's about safety. So the reason we really went ahead and did this was about safety. We don't want people living in unsafe houses, and that's really the only reason we took the ball and ran. It's got to be safe. So we don't care about energy efficiency because that's not keeping people safe, right? Now we're saying we want an ice barrier, though. We're going to require an ice barrier. You guys know what an ice barrier is? In the wintertime, when the snow on your roof melts down to the bottom and you just have like 3 feet of snow at the bottom of your roof, and then it melts and refreezes and melts and refreezes, you build a water dam and the water goes back under your shingles. So this ice barrier is 3 feet? I don't
2
know.
feet from a warm wall.
So the very bottom 2 feet has to have a rubber membrane so that you can't get water backed up underneath shingles. Has anybody died from water backing up underneath shingles? So I'm confused here. Are we still talking about safety is the only reason we're doing building codes? Or are we going to get into, well, we don't care if anybody saves any money, but we don't want them to have to replace any sheetrock or plywood at the
So
bottom
what's
of their
the
house?
cost of that?
It's negligible. Negligible.
But everything is becoming like this. Is my point. We're now mixing. It's not about safety anymore. It's about more regulation and more regulation and more regulation. Now we're going to add ice barrier regulation. For what? That's not safety. So now we're not talking about safety. Now we're talking about just putting regulations on people and more regulations on people, making it more expensive. Now they're going to have to pay for a membrane, making it more expensive.
I think there's certain things, I don't think you want to overemphasize or talk about the worst scenario. I think what I'm seeing here, and we don't have to agree with it, we can just take them out. There's just some basic things that are being looked at as far as to make the structure, whether it be safer, more efficient, whatever. All this stuff is subject to come out depending on what we want. I think, though, Jeff, where I disagree with you on is you don't want it, any of it whatsoever. And that's where I think there is a need to have some kind of codes in place. Now, what degree we go to, we can pick this apart and take those out. But let's just. Well,
And that's the point I'm trying to make is, if you want building codes and you say it's for safety, then don't blend in other things that aren't safety.
I'm okay with that. We may not want any of this stuff in here, but I think my opinion is we need codes to a certain degree. Now, whether how you wanted to go out and do it, I think the thing about what Mike just recommended on the basement on the things, that's a good idea. But I guess before we keep going here, folks, do you want codes in Leavenworth County? And if you want them, then we should go through this and decide what we want them to be.
Are we looking at updating from what we currently have, right?
Yes, that's a whole
So what's the
process.
push behind the change right now?
The codes committee.
Well, the codes committee and I believe the BOCC at the time wanted a more current code than the 06. The 06 is being phased out. Virtually everybody is building to a later code, the 12 and the 18. As the code cycles keep going down the path, those later codes will become adopted. Theoretically, the newest code is the best code from a regulatory standpoint. I don't agree with that. I think a stable code that accommodates local construction practice is your best option, which in this case, it's been agreed on that 2012 is that stable code that we're looking for. These changes that we proposed are pretty rudimentary changes and pretty common to most jurisdictions. Size of eligible accessory structures that require permits. It's normally 100 to 200 feet anywhere you go. Really, the only thing that stands out here is that certificate of code compliance, and the reason that we've put that in here because we don't have an inspection process that accommodates that inspection process and puts the architect of record online for responsibility should anything happen in that particular structure.
Will this require more staff for the county?
No, not with this. We're not proposing inspection.
But that's my whole point, is we're already not inspecting people building to the 2006 code. Now we want to add a bunch more regulations, and it's all still voluntary. So what is the difference between 06 and...
Yeah, well, one of the things is we've actually gone through this code chapter by chapter, which I don't believe that happened in the 06 code.
No,
There
we
are
just- yep.
several spots within that we have found that contradict each other, and it's which is it? This will be a clean cut, where there should be no contradiction.
But it's adding more than the 06 ad.
When one thing that I've in talking to builders, the bidding software that a lot of the construction companies use, they can put in the house or accessory building, whatever it is, go in and select what code they want it to be built to. 06 is falling off of those. So they're either going to build to the 2012 or newer. Or the homeowner says, no, I want it to be at 06. Well, now they have to manually go do everything.
Whether we have
so it costs more.
whether we have a code in place or not.
They're still good. They
That's
should-
my whole
most of them.
point.
The good ones will still
contractors,
do it. Yes.
right? The contractor is going to. Well, our
The
software only
good
does
ones.
12.
What you just said, the good ones.
That's right.
But if you don't have rules,
That's right.
there's bad
so,
ones.
So it's up to the individual owner of the property to pick a good builder. It's up to us. You're saying it's up to us?
No, we're the sixth largest county in the state of Kansas. We're not a little rural county out in western Kansas anymore. The growth in this part of the state has been exponential. We got a lot of people moving in. These are very minimal standards. This is not a Johnson County style code.
Some more regulations.
But
more regulations because everybody else is doing it.
well,
John,
you have
John, how you want to slide to me?
Just a couple. So that-
Let's get to them, then we can,
Okay,
we can
go ahead.
we can
Sorry.
get back. Let's just go ahead and get to
Okay,
them.
so that was the end of the commercial side. Couple additional items recommended. These are not written into anything we have prepared because we prior did not have the support from the previous board. So, but the committee recommended that all townships be subject to all codes, and they also recommended that to require building inspections. And they said third-party inspectors are available prior to creating an inspection department. It'll hold contractors accountable, and the committee has concerns that voluntary compliance makes adopted codes ineffective and unreliable.
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, John.
So third-party inspectors, are those free? Who pays for that?
No, third-party inspectors will be paid for by the applicant, whether it's the homeowner or a developer.
Do the townships have the ability to govern themselves in this manner with codes?
Well, the incorporated towns, the Basel, Lansing, Tonganoxie, they do, and they have adoptive codes in each one of the towns.
But I mean, like High Prairie Township, for instance. Okay. So they rely on the county for code guidance.
So I have a legal question. We were named in a particular lawsuit, and we have adopted codes, and we've excluded 2 townships in the county. What is the law regarding excluding townships, and would it lower the county's liability if we incorporated all of our townships into the codes?
Commissioner, this lawsuit is, it's still active. This question would be best addressed in an executive session.
Well, let's do it next time we're in executive session.
But the short answer is no. It's just like a zoning. There's a residential zone. There's an industrial zone. This is no different. There's a building code zone and there's a non-building code zone. Same thing. We ran that by legal already.
Right, a different attorney
Last
though.
slide.
Yeah.
Last slide, yes.
Okay, let me just go back and do this then. Since we got the last slide, we all know where we stand on some things. The question now is they need direction. Do we want to accept these with adding one Mike did and move forward? We know how Jeff feels about it, so they can get started.
Sure.
Or do we want to take another route? But let's make a decision on this because we're starting to repeat ourselves on what we think's right and wrong.
Do we need a motion? Do you want to do it in
I don't think
terms of a
It's
motion?
a work
or-
session,
I
so you
think
can't do
just a
it.
work
Well, I
session.
mean, that
I
consensus.
like consensus on it so we can get new direction. I know how Jeff feels, so I'll have to ask him. Mike?
Well, I'm in favor.
Yes.
Yes.
Nelson?
I think I'll have to go with Culbertson on this one.
Okay. 3-2, you got direction on it. When we bring it back, we can do some more discussion on it. Is there any more else to fight, argue, discuss on this issue? Huh? Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So we're done.
We good?
Got one more item.
Oh, no, this is going to be the one that breaks the camel's back.
I don't think this will break the camel's back.
Oh, yeah, the utility thing, I'm sorry. It might.
So, we have, at least 3 of the commission members have discussed a ad hoc committee, a utilities
Yeah,
committee.
you guys weren't here yet.
It was a comprehensive plan process in 2024. We got direction a number of times from the commission to move forward with it. We're now at that point where we think we're ready to accommodate that particular committee. So in general terms, for those of you that weren't subject to this presentation 100 times by me, in essence, what this is, it's a 6-member committee with 1 ex officio member that looks at the items of utility purveyance, which is going to be wastewater, water, and utility, internet connectivity. Right now, one of the biggest challenges in Leavenworth County is that we don't have appropriate utilities in particular areas, or at least sustainable utilities in areas. And the suggestion has been to put together a technical committee for a period of time to accommodate those particular questions. In other words, identify the questions, bring actionable items back to you to address the issue of utilities. In my view, we need to move forward with it. We're kind of behind the curve in this particular situation. So what I would suggest, again, 3 of these guys have heard this ad nauseum, is that you allow us to bring to you a list of names to form the committee to accomplish that particular task. Take a look at the utilities in Leavenworth County. Take a look at the available resources for each one of those utilities. Be creative in your resolution of the challenges of each one of those utilities, and then bring it to you for your action, your review and action. And have this committee be in place until we get a definitive direction on how we're going to address items such as wastewater and rural water as it relates to economic development or even construction of residential subdivisions. It impacts all development in Leavenworth County. So really that's what we're looking for today. We're looking for that affirmation of, yes, John, move forward, bring those names to us if you believe that that's an appropriate way to address the utility components. And again, they've heard this probably at least 5, 6 times over the comprehensive plan process.
What was the discussion?
Well, utilities are identified in the comprehensive plan as having some challenges in Leavenworth County. The one that comes to mind is wastewater. So is there a way to address wastewater in the multiple development categories, higher density development to rural development? I don't think that answer is singular in nature. So to address that and to address things like fire flows for industrial development, commercial development in unincorporated areas of Leavenworth County, you need to have some form of action plan to address those things moving into the future. You can't wait for an economic rock to hit you on top of the head. So we've got, a 5,000 square foot manufacturing facility, but we need 950 gallons of fire flow at this hydrant. There's no way for you to address that being reactionary. So,
But John, this is just a committee.
It's just a committee.
Start talking to bring that back.
It's just a
to
committee,
us.
right? To identify those issues
And then
provide
bounce it off to
an actionable plan for you. In other words, here's what the problems are. Here's where we believe the answers may be. Do you want us to move forward? That's all this is.
So is it going to be similar to, what is it, like the planning commission where we each have 2 or whatever? Or
This will be technically based. So these people will have backgrounds in development. They'll be engineers, people that are technically proficient in these particular items. That's why it's ad hoc and for a specific period of time. We need people that are in the field with this and have decades of experience, and we believe we have those people. So we want to move forward with that to give you the technical expertise to give you an adequate plan moving into the future.
I hesitate a little bit because we have examples of where professionals, have sometimes a limited amount of thought process, kind of a bubble, if you will, and then There's not sometimes a lot of reasonable thought that comes out of those situations, so I just hesitate a little bit.
So this is why we mixed up developers, engineers, project managers, utility managers, people that have specific knowledge, and then included an ex officio member, a staff member that can bring all of those elements together to bring a full spectrum of opinion, not a hyper-focused section of opinion that only gives you 2 items out of 10. So that's the intent of having this, not only having the technical expertise, but specific to each one of the criteria that we're going to be addressing as part of the mission statement of the committee itself.
So are you saying you already have names of individuals or professionals of that?
We think we do, yes. We'll offer suggestions.
And who would be spearheading this committee?
Probably me at this point.
That's who I would insist
That's what
on.
I'm
John,
looking
the
for.
30 years experience, John, that's who I feel comfortable doing
That's
it.
what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I agree. Really.
Okay, thank you.
But then it's just coming back to us, and we can say, hey, this is clear as mud, and we don't want it. So
It's
just
simply
to
an
get it started.
advisory committee.
Yeah, I agree.
And how many people?
Six
Six.
members.
Each different field. Anything else on that one?
Does this have to be codified in a resolution, or is this just like an ad hoc?
My view is that it'd be ad hoc.
Yeah. So I think I think it can be handled at the staff level like John's proposing, but the idea is they're going to come up with some plans, and there's no point in pulling these people in and taking hours of their time, their professional time, if the board doesn't support even having the committee. The committee can be formed by John because it's his area, but if the board's not interested in it, then there's no point in him doing it.
Well,
I
I'm
think that's
interested.
kind
I
of
just
what
want to make sure we had, I think that's what Will's going, I want to make sure one staff has got
Because of
experience,
direction,
so
go.
he can see, or she, whoever it is, can show us, give them direction, can see where there may be some flaws there, or maybe they're not, like Vanessa was saying, thinking outside the box or along the lines we want to. I think it's a good idea, at least take a look at. I think it'll help Lebanon County tremendously by getting this group of people together. Just my 2 cents.
So you don't envision that there would be a split because you have an even number?
There may be a situation where we have 2 people from the same district, but they have very different.
I think she means like when they're voting.
I know on the voting.
When you come
You're
to
gonna
vote,
come out to
bring it
agree
for
vote on
us.
something.
And again, it's an advisory committee.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to have a lot. There'll be conflict for sure, but it'll be my job to navigate that conflict. and
That's what I was
come
going
out
to
with
say. You'll be
yeah,
the vote
I-
splitter, it sounds
I
like.
won't have
Yeah.
a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, please. Are we finished?
So you got direction?
Hey, they got direction.
Let's do it.
We'll put the committee together and forward the names to.
Sounds like a plan. Okay, folks, good meeting, good information. We are done.